You're listening to live streaming right here in Northport, Florida. This is Real Talk. This is John Rawlings, the Executive Director of CBRA, and I am very, very privileged, as always, to have a representative from the fire department, and especially when it becomes one of the world famous chiefs in the country, Chief Titus. How you doing, buddy?
I don't know. I think that was a really big introduction. I'm not sure if I'm world famous, but I'll, I'll take Northport. I think most everybody here knows me. How are you today,
I
John?
thought I just thought I'd stretch that out a little bit. See if you because you're a world traveler too now, right?
Well, I am. I just got back from vacation. Yeah, so did a couple weeks in the Northeast. It was beautiful. Nice fall leaves and a little bit of rain, but yeah, it was nice.
That's fantastic. So we've got a new project that's happening right over at City Hall area. Do you want to talk about the station?
Sure. So we just before I left, I was out of office for 3 weeks at a conference, then a couple weeks vacation, but kind of I got all my stuff out, and then our final day to have all of our stuff out of the fire station was last Friday. So if you drive by, you'll see you've got fencing up right now, and they'll spend the next probably 2, 3 plus weeks kind of going through part of the bid process. Allows them to go through and which helps bring the cost down. They'll go through and salvage some things. So like, those interior doors, things like that. They'll be taking some things out of there, and kind of reduces the cost for us a little bit. So they'll do that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, salvage, get things out of there, and then sometime in December, probably mid-Decemberish, they'll start actual tear down of the facility, and then we're probably looking at a groundbreaking, um, maybe January sometime to start bringing things back forward. So
With with with
hoping
that
for
being said, what are we doing with our new station? What's it going to look like?
um, well, it's a surprise. So they've got a rendering. We'll get something out soon, but they've got a rendering. I think it'll be. I think the public will enjoy it. It'll go good here at City Green. It'll be a little bit different configuration than the current fire station that we're in. Um, right now, crew quarters and fire administration were all in the kind of same side of the building, and so in the new station, the crew quarters will be on one side of the apparatus bay, and fire administration will be on the other side of the apparatus bay. So that gives a little bit of separation for our business operations versus our emergency operations. So that's helpful to the crews and the staff. They still have access to us and can come over anytime, and vice versa. Um, but that helps us a little bit. And we have, some additional offices and growth. Obviously, we've grown pretty significantly since the station was built in 1999. And so we've got some spare space for future expansion, office space for the positions that we've added since that time, with our planned growth. So we're really looking forward to it. We're looking at about probably 12 to 14 months for construction time, and then we'll be right now we're kind of scattered throughout City Hall, so it makes it a little bit difficult with team cohesion, and we're out of the fire station, so we got to make a little more effort to make sure we get out, check with crews, and make sure everything's going on, and then to get in contact with each other. But it's there's some advantages to being at City Hall, which closer with commission chambers, meetings, and city staff here. So yeah, it's nice.
Well, we're nearing the end of hurricane season. Thank God. But I'm knocking everywhere.
I think we
But
both.
we've had some conversations with Stacy Alicio about the EOC. Do you have anything to add into that topic as far as what your thoughts are on that project?
Yeah, what an important project for the city. So, emergency management. For those that don't know it, emergency management really serves the entire city. So there's a lot of things that they do when we don't have storms going on that include recovery from previous storms, and then preparation for future storms. And then when we get into storm season, obviously they have a lot going on, and it's worked in the past, but it's been very difficult. we had an EOC set up kind of in a classroom type format here at City Hall for a long time. This building isn't really rated for that. There is a future upgrade to the windows here and some of the openings and stuff like that will help this building be more secure. But it's created some challenges. One, there's no shower facilities here at City Hall. So, when you get past getting your second day, at the end of your second day, getting to your third day here, without a shower, it gets a little bit difficult and cranky and doesn't smell real great. And there's not really dedicated sleeping facilities. So, our setup has been kind of find a floor in an office and go sleep somewhere and get some rest when you can. The new facility will give the opportunity for people to actually have a dedicated area where they can go during their time where they're supposed to not be working, so that they can get some rest during the storm. There'll be shower and bathroom facilities. There'll be kitchen facilities. And even the kitchen facility here is very, very limited, microwaves and things like that. There's just not a lot. And some of the other challenges, in the past that we've had is, a number of years ago, we had significant flooding here in the city, but it was blue skies everywhere else. So, it was the floodplain to the north of us, took a bunch of rain over a period of time. Everybody around us went back to normal operations, on the Monday morning. And we were still, we still had roads, with 6 feet of water on them in the estate. So we were full bore at the Emergency Operations Center. And it makes it difficult because everything that we do has to go through Sarasota County and then up to the state. And so, when their EOC is not open at full operations because they're at blue skies, it makes it difficult for us. And in the future, we can actually have their critical EOC staff come down and be here. So we have them directly here as a direct link. The other thing that's made it difficult is, when the storm does pass, there's times where we've had to have still City Hall out of, closed off to the general public and not back to normal operations because we're still running emergency operations here. So in the future, when that facility opens up, we'll be able to resume operations for the city, regular operations, much faster, and open City Hall back up because our EOC staff that's dedicated will be at the EOC and won't be occupying office space and things here. So there's a lot of advantages to doing that. It's again, safety, comfort. When you don't get a lot of rest during those times and don't have an area of refuge to go, it gets difficult to remain that focus, especially when you get into an extended, deployment or operational period. So it's really, really important. And that, again, that facility serves all of us internally, the city equally. And then, it's inward facing that way, but it's also outward facing to communities so much that they do for helping, our business owners and our homeowners, get things back up to speed and providing resources from FEMA and other agencies and, all of the partnerships and partners that we have. So it'll give a facility where they can actually come again and be available for us to get back to normal operations faster.
Well, you might have I liked your idea there, the blue sky idea, as far as the aspect of paying attention to what's happening south. The hurricane that we had, Ian, I went to a doctor's appointment and it was just total chaos. And I can tell you on an emotional level, I was not prepared to leave here and drive down Bee Ridge to go to the doctor's appointment and realize that it was normal.
Yeah.
And it was not normal here.
It's very
and that I was in that excited mode, I guess, or the adrenaline mode.
Sure.
You guys get in that when there's a fire or an emergency event. I used to get into it when I was at the hospital, but to go through the hurricane, think that the whole county is involved, and then drive north of us and there's no one asking if you're okay because they're not living it. And it's just strange how that works out,
Absolutely.
But those things are managed and handled differently too, aren't they? As far as the internal.
As far as whether it's blue skies here or somewhere else.
Well, just even in inner department, you've got a concern with city staff, but your guys have their houses here, their families here.
Sure.
If we're not protecting them in an EOC situation, that's one thing. New station, that's another thing. But there's the psychological side of things that you guys go through too, because sometimes you're 24 hours or longer in those situations where you're active and on the street, right?
I'd say, well, and for us in the EOC, typically that's at the least, unless there's really a nothing storm, it's at the very least 48 to 72 hours that we're here and displaced away from our families. So a lot of us make preparations and make sure that our family's taken care of, and then we come here and kind of go into lockdown. And oftentimes there's really not any ability, if we through the last big storm, we lost communications, cell phone lines for a while, everything else, and so we don't really have access to our families, and they don't have access to us. So we want to know that they're safe. They should know that we're safe while we're doing this. And then the crew's the same thing. We call in depending on the severity of the storm. Last several we've called in 3 shifts. So a fire station that might normally have staffing of 5 people during the day, we're putting 18 people into that station, plus then we're adding other city resources there as well, because each one of our stations, as soon as the storm passes, we have crews that go out, and basically they're called T-FIT teams. So they're tactical first aid teams. Once the storm passes, they go out, they clear. They each have a specific route. They clear all the major roadways so that we can begin resuming emergency operations. And any backlog of calls that were received through 911 while we had to shut down, because once we get sustained winds beyond 45 miles an hour, police cars are off the road, fire trucks are off the road, ambulances are off the road. We're waiting for the storm to pass. So when 911 calls come in during that time, they kind of prioritize them and put them in a queue and stack them. And so as soon as those T-FIT teams go out and clear those routes, and they call us back and say the routes are clear, then we basically contact the communications center, and they start dispatching calls based on their level of priority. So a call that came in 10 minutes ago, that's a high priority call, we might be dispatched to that for a call that came in 36 hours ago. That's a lower priority call. So,
we've served twice together in the EOC.
Yes.
And the first time through was a great practice run. The second time through was different, but you had just describing what you just talked about with the route clearing and all that stuff. You came in to the EOC and said, I just got back from on the road. So just because you're serving in the EOC doesn't mean that as the chief of fire, you're not out there, checking things out and seeing what things are all about.
So a lot of times, technically, when we're in lockdown and we're in our the position that we're serving, we kind of are locked down in the EOC. But I do B shift. So B shift is typically the night shift. So it's a 12-hour night shift. I don't sleep much. So during the daytime, I'll still help in the EOC. I'll help, whoever's filling my position, but then I'll also go check in with crews, go out and check the status of the area and things like that, if the roads are traversable, and come back. So that's what you saw was during that downtime, because we were able to get out of the building to go out and check on things. So yes.
And I know you were thinking I was going to bring up the end of that game, which was you running down the hallway, but there's some moments in there of tense, and then there's moments of relief, and you kind of experienced both within about a 5-minute span of time, because we were supposed to get hit, and you announced it, and then you ran down the hallway and you ran back and said, well, it turned. That emotion is real within the organization, not just out on the streets, because everybody on the streets was thinking the same thing.
Absolutely.
But when you guys were under fire, and no pun intended, but when you're in the line there, it's tough, because you're walking into a room full of everyone watching some of the same video of what's coming at us, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
Resource-wise, you guys are on top of it for the citizens across the board. I watched that firsthand, experienced it, got to interview you guys about that kind of thing. But that organization for an EOC and first responders, it's major in a situation like that, isn't it?
Absolutely. So just like we have the Emergency Operations Center set up here, then most of our major divisions have what's called a DOC. So they have a Department Operations Center. So my operations chief and my district chiefs, um, you know, previously they were housed at 81. And actually during that last storm, where they had their Department Operations Center set up, that wall in the training room, actually that whole window wall blew in. So they had to take everything out of that room while the storm's going on and kind of move it to another area and continue operating. But they're basically, they go into lockdown just like we do once that 45-mile-an-hour sustained wind happens. And then they're looking at, okay, what are we going to do as soon as we get the go? So they're preparing. They have a little bit of downtime, but it's kind of like, waiting for the race to start. So there's some anxiety there. There's some a lot of stress. Same thing. They don't really know how their families are doing or how they're weathering the storm. And then, as soon as that passes and we get clearance from those TFIT teams, then they're off. And they're managing those 911 calls that were stacked, and then also taking in and responding to 911 calls that are coming in, real time. And they're in constant communication with us for resources they need, and we're directing where they get staged, how those things, where they're coming from, how long they're going to take to get here, tracking how those things are paid for, what that's going to happen. And that happens with us, with Public Works, with the police department, with utilities, all doing the same thing. And so they're handling the external facing operations, and then they're filtering all the information back to us to make sure that we can get them the resources that they need. We communicate through Sarasota County, then and to the state for those resources. So, yeah.
So that management is that's a definitely high level skill set that's organized. I know we were prepared and we were ready to move, but once that storm turned, we were also ready to assist across the board. So all those things matter, and our coastlines really got hit worse last couple times than in inland. We had our flooding, so that was a completely different aspect of that storm. People were ready for hurricanes, but I don't think they were ready for the flooding and the wiping out of bridges and being able to be mobile. That affects us too, as far as the reporting side and also the fire department and first responders side.
Of course.
We've got Price Boulevard shut down right now. You guys have got that mapped out. We've talked about that in depth. But I kind of want to go back for a second because we're talking about the EOC, and with your knowledge and background and everything else on dealing with the fire department and getting things through City Hall. How would citizens interpret what the EOC presentation is right now? Because there is a flow that has to happen with commission and different things like that. You guys have found the resources. Can you kind of give an overview from your perspective on how that process is an educational piece for the citizens too, so that they can engage properly?
I think it's a lot of what we talked about. There's so many things that happen kind of behind the scenes that the general public never sees, that we have to put in place to get resources for communications, to make sure that we have the ability to get reimbursed. And that's going to get harder and harder as time goes on. Reimbursement, FEMA reimbursement has always been difficult. I think it's going to become more difficult, and there's going to be less reimbursement in the future, which is going to be tough.
It's about half now, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what that percentage is. I don't want to speculate, but there's talk about it being reduced even further. So all of those things are just critically important to the bottom line for the safety of the public. One of the most important things that we do is, when a storm is coming, is trying to get information out early enough so that people can prepare. And of course, when we look at a storm and when we take all the information that we have, we try to put out messaging, and we put out, if there's an evacuation or things like that, we rely on the general public knowing where to go and get that information. We publicize it. We talk about it all year long. We put out flyers and we have seminars and we have workshops and things like that. So in different communities, so that people know, because the toughest thing for us is some of our low-lying areas, some of those zone A's that like in the mobile home park and things like that. Those communities typically don't do well in storms of any significance, and when when the storm passes, a lot of times those are the communities that are really difficult for us to get into. And so, we really try and prioritize and emphasize to people, if you can go early. The difficult time, when you get towards in the August season, when the Gulf water is really warm, a storm can spin up really quickly close to shore, and we don't have a whole lot of lead time. And of course, the problem with Florida is it's a peninsula, so there's not too many places you can go. It's either head to the other coast, depending on what that expected travel course of the storm is, or you can head north. And both of those, obviously, there's a limited number of roads and ability to get there. So the earlier somebody makes plans, and the earlier they plan to leave the area, the better off it is. Because the worst thing is to be stuck on the road, when something like that happens. And the emergency shelters that we put up really are supposed to be just for that. They're supposed to be emergencies for the people that don't have somewhere else to go safe. Their house, if we tell them to evacuate and they don't have anywhere else to go, that's what those shelters are for. So,
well, and I want to go to the aspect of now the citizens' involvement on getting behind the push to build the EOC. If as the chief of fire and I guess the essential piece inside, one of the essential pieces inside the EOC, and the push for it, how would you tell the citizens to get engaged, and why should they support it?
I think we wavered a little bit for a little while. I think we've got that support back. There's been workshops in the commission. We went through a difficult time trying to establish funding for that, and then it was kind of put on hold. And I think, as everybody is very, very familiar, the city can't borrow money, and there's a lot of projects and infrastructure projects in the city that are high priority. So it's where do those taxpayers go, and how do we do them? And I think we're back on track. We're supposed to go in front of commission in December for them to vote on approval. We have a contract right now. It's basically a not to exceed price, and that I think is good until sometime early January. So we're hoping to get in front of commission and get approved. It's going to take 2 readings because the money that's there, the money needs to be moved, which is, so anytime you do a budget amendment, there has to be 2 readings for that. So we're on track to get that done. While I was gone, emergency management met with the commissioners, and they had some questions. I think they went through and answered all their questions and provided them all the information that they were looking for. So we're confident that the project will go through. And a lot of people don't know, emergency management fell under the fire department for a while, mostly from a management piece, because some people don't have really the familiarity of how that works. But ideally, we've been working for a while, and now this fiscal year, now that we're in emergency management, now falls under the city manager's office, which is really where it should be, because again, they serve everybody equally in the city. So we obviously have a vested interest as emergency services, because we know how important it is being a part of the EOC, but also knowing what all of those functions are. And so getting all the other city departments on board and making sure that they understand, and then just answering questions as they come in. I think a lot of the public really don't know. Again, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that they don't see day to day, and they think that building sits empty except for when we have a hurricane. And that's just not true. We're always looking for place to have classes, places to have the public come in and meet and stuff, and that facility will be available for some of our business partners to come in and meet. There's going to be inspectors from the building department are also going to be housed in there, so they'll have touchdown points that come in the morning, and then go out into the field and do their things in a place where they can end up at the end of the day. And like our CERT teams, we can come in and have a meeting there. There will be a lot going on in that building, even in downtime when storms aren't going on. So,
I watch the relationships inside the EOC. Outside the EOC, they're just as strong. Can you talk about the relationship that you have with the Stacy's of the world in the EOC and that management team, and how you guys coordinate together?
it's so important for us, as I said, by statute, all of our requests, for a municipality, for any municipality, they have to go through the county, and then that gets filtered up to the state. So those relationships are critically important between us and the county. And the county emergency manager is phenomenal. She's from down south, Lee County, and actually Stacy and Mike, so our emergency manager and our deputy emergency manager, both worked together with Sandra, who's the county's emergency manager. They worked together years ago. So when she got selected to come up to Sarasota County, we were kind of ecstatic, because that relationship is very good and very supportive both directions. And so it's been great. They certainly call us, and it's constant communication, back and forth. It's during storm time, it's several meetings a day, but throughout the year, it's constant communications on training and things that are on the horizon. And as I said, emergency management, when we don't have storms going on, just regular parts of the year, they're working on our continuity of operations plans. They're working on our comprehensive emergency management plan. They're working on all these things, relationships with all of our nonprofits in the city on their availability, what things can they offer to the public when the storm comes. Churches, great relationship with the churches, and things are going on. As a matter of fact, we're supposed to have record cold weather coming up over the next few days. Tonight, I think 20 degrees, I think lower than what's on record in the last 60 years or something like that. And so 100 Church comes forward and is used as a cold weather shelter, and so we help coordinate with them and getting volunteers to staff that, so that our homeless population, or people that if they don't have heat, that they have someplace that they can go and they can be out of the weather and be safe when it's really cold. So those relationships are incredibly important. And then talking about the consistency of messaging, so that's something that we've worked a lot with Sarasota County on, so that the public is hearing the same message wherever they go and listen. Now, it might be different for Northport specifically than it is in Sarasota when we have a storm, because again, if we have major flooding down here and they don't, the message may be different in those two different areas, but the terminology is the same, and how we put that messaging out, we share that messaging back and forth, so that if somebody's going to Sarasota County Emergency Management page, there's a link and information they can get for Northport, and vice versa. So,
the strength of the management team inside of a city during an emergency event, that really shines through, and the citizens don't normally get to see that. I know I served there twice, and I watched it. Like I said, there were two different environments. One was a little bit more relaxed, and the other one had the packets of meals sitting at the elevator waiting on us to spend a week. It was from a citizen standpoint, first time in the door, it was an eye-opening experience. The second time, it completely flipped upside down. And I remember trauma alerts at Grant Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. When we didn't have one, we were relaxed, we were chilled, and we were laughing and having a good time. It flips when there's that next level, and knowing that next level is there. The one thing I noticed that I want to tell the citizens about is the professionalism never changed. It was 100% professional, 100% focus, no matter whether it was crisis or The first one was crisis with it's probably not going to happen,
Sure.
and it didn't. And I saw both. So the value that I saw that I can repeat to the citizens is the utmost respect, the utmost of care, and the utmost of focus was given. And you guys do a phenomenal job inside the walls. There's no question um, uh, about the professionalism. I give a lot of credit to, and it just can't be Stacy and her crew and Mike and all those guys, but there are so many people who are giving inside of the EOC itself. Can you talk about the components that are there? Because you've got communication, you've got different things happening. Can you explain the kind of the overview of what happens in that room during a crisis situation?
Yeah, so it's basically there's a command structure that's set up, and then there's a finance component, there's a logistics component, there's the operations component, and a planning component, and all those pieces kind of come together. And as I said, there's a lot of coordination between those department operations centers because they're formulating, their plan and what their needs are and things like that. They filter them up to us, and then we're trying to get those things, and we try and put everything together kind of into one planning document. So basically, there's a planning document. We do 12-hour operational periods, and so at the beginning of every operational period, we spent the previous operational period preparing the document which is basically kind of our score sheet of music for what's going to happen over that next 12-hour period. So what are the priorities? What's the safety message? What are the resources? Where are they going to be staged? What are the operations that are going to be going on? Who's who's the contact person for each one of those groups? And it's really, it gets busy. So you've got a computer up. You've got two different Teams links that you're working. One's internal to the city, one's external to Sarasota County, and then you've got a radio that you're speaking back and forth with the Department Operations Center with, and then answering the phone too, as well as cell phones. So it gets pretty busy because it's just a lot going on. So all those different components are going on. There's a schedule of planned meetings to kind of talk and coordinate all of those operations as that operational period goes on. And again, it's handling what's going on right now, and then also planning for that next 12-hour period. And then there's kind of a handoff in the mornings and in the evenings to that next group as they take over and kind of fulfill each one of those positions. And there's specialized training for each one of those positions in the Emergency Operations Center. There's people that fulfill those positions that are doing things during storm time that they don't ever do in their normal everyday job. Now, for me, obviously, there's some correlation and consistencies between what I'm doing in the Emergency Operations Center and what I do today when I'm working. But for a lot of people, they're fulfilling roles for things that they don't do on a daily basis. And so they really work very hard to get trained and to step up and fulfill a responsibility that initially when they get into it, it's foreign to them. And so learning how to operate in that structure and learning how to do those things and communicate and where to go to get certain things. And it takes a little bit of time. And, anytime you have transition of staff or changes in, circumstances for people, it's training up more people. So that's emergency management. In addition to all the other stuff, spends a great part of the year just doing training. So make sure that all of our staff have, the same level of training, all the minimum requirements. And then like tomorrow we have a emergency operations center drill here. Sarasota County will be participating, and we'll be working as if we have a storm that'll be set up, and we'll be kind of putting all those plans to practice and making sure that everything's good. And anytime we have a storm, there's afterwards there's groups and processes of meetings that go on to kind of do an after action report and identify what went well, what could have gone better, what can we do, what did we encounter this time that maybe we haven't before, we can be better prepared in the future. Or if there was a communication issue, how did that happen, how do we shore up our communications, how do we same thing, facilities, for the last probably 7 or 8 years, the after action reports have said, we need a dedicated emergency operations facility, not just from our internal, team players, but our external team players too, that interact with us know how important that is. So all of those things come out so that, the goal is every year get better and better because much like the fire department, our mission statement is all about being exceptional. And so I tell everybody, if you strive for exceptional, if you fall a little bit short, that's okay. You're still well above average. But there's not a lot of room for error in the things that we do. So when somebody picks up that phone and calls 911, or when they're storms coming in, they have a pretty high level of expectation of information they should be getting from us and what they should be doing to be prepared. And if it's an emergency response, what type of people are going to be showing up when they arrive at that emergency and how they're going to operate. And they don't pick up the phone and call 911 and say, just send me a couple of average people when they can get here and hopefully they can handle this. They want athletes and doctors and surgeons, and they're a very high level of expectation of our performance and what they're going to receive when we get there, and I have that expectation as well. We want
Right.
our people to be the best in our community, to experience that in their time of need.
You're part of a multi-team, so to speak. You run your own team, which is the fire department, and then you participate on the team within the EOC.
Sure.
And the exceptional drive that everybody has is the commitment to the citizens of Northport. That's the beauty in this whole conversation, is the pride that goes into the operations. And Scott, I had you on my mind. Sean Kirkpatrick says he was late to the topic, but I know you can address this. Are we talking about a new facility? Yes. Or are we talking about the old facility? Yes. Because you just happen to be in my office now, because that closet was my office when I was in the OC. Are you there yet?
Yeah, I'm here now.
I think my bookshelf is behind. No, I'm just teasing.
Oh no, this was a storage room that you were in. So they put a little paint on the walls, and obviously I moved some of my stuff in. But Sean asked a great question, and some people in the city have missed that. So a number of years ago, I'm going to say, I think it was 5 years ago, we had a project on the books, maybe 6, to remodel Fire Station 81, because it was construction was completed in late 1999, and the administration at the time, it felt like it met the needs for the future, and we kind of outgrew it. So we were looking at how do we reconfigure it differently. We were going to kind of remodel in roughly that same footprint and see how we were going to be able to do that, and that's what the project was planned for. Plus, we had some aging infrastructure with plumbing and some issues and some things that we were going to address and fix. And when one of the hurricanes came a couple of years ago, I was talking a little bit earlier about it, when the windows blew out in that room in the Department Operations Center. There was a significant amount of damage to the station, and so when we were in the planning stages right then, we were already meeting with the architect and everything and designing what that remodel was going to look like. And after that storm came, because of the amount of damage, everything had to be brought up to current code. And with what the damage was, when they looked at it, they said it's cost prohibitive to try and fix this and bring everything up to code. It was going to be extraordinarily expensive. And they said your money would be better spent on building a new facility that is up to current standards. Honestly, the remodel, bringing it up to it was very, very close to their estimates. Were very close to what a whole new station would be. So a tear down and a rebuild. It resolves all of the issues, and some of the issues we weren't sure. Some of the plumbing stuff was going to be, we weren't sure if we were going to have to get into cutting up the floor and doing some things and some other stuff. So that storm, we weren't real happy about it. It kind of set us back for a few years because we had to find additional funding and do some things. But we were able to do that, get it back on track, and we got a guaranteed maximum price, and we're under contract now, and they're getting ready to again tear it down in a couple of weeks. So it will be Fire Station 81 will be a new facility. The EOC facility, we don't have a facility right now for EOC. So here at City Hall, it's just a classroom. So when he's asking about the EOC facility, there really isn't one. We've been making do in a classroom on the second floor of City Hall for a number of years. And I remember storms where there's rain pushing in, around the windows. The windows were intact, but it was actually coming through the walls. And this facility just, it wasn't designed to be an emergency operations center. We had we had staff that were very unhappy to be ordered to be here because they were worried about their safety. And at the same time as they're worried about their safety, they're worried about their family who they left at home. And
right.
So we have an obligation to provide them a facility where they can operate safely. They don't have those concerns. And again, it'll get City Hall back up to normal operations much quicker than having us continue to operate here and keeping this facility closed, post-storm. So.
Awesome. I'm going to give a couple shout outs. Northport Estates neighbors, Northport neighbors, living in Northport, Florida, Northport, Florida real estate, and Northport truth seekers, and friendlies in Northport. They all shared and accepted the sharing of this information to get it out into the community. And I really, really appreciate the sharing and the acceptance of information out into the social media pages, because it's important to get the information out to the community, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we appreciate, John, I've tremendously enjoyed being on your show and having the opportunity to take questions like Sean's and to kind of have dialogue with you and talk as we've gone on. I think we've been doing, how long have we been doing this now? A year?
Gosh, I've been at this almost 9 years now, and it's all volunteer. It's all everything I do with the live streaming and participating and doing that. The full-time job is like you have a full-time job and you work the EOC, and that's still job related. Well, I full-time realtor and I volunteer full-time, and Sean Kirkpatrick and I do Bobcat Blitz, which is a sports program on Tuesday nights that we do live streaming, and we interview the athletes and coaches, and we're trying to spearhead communication out into the real community, which is not just Northport, our surrounding areas, but featuring our fire department, our police department, City Hall, Public Works, EOC, Stacy and her gang, communications. And that's really truly what community is all about. And you guys do a great job. You guys do a lot of give back, and you really have a good push of young and old firefighters out there, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we try to push a lot of our information out, social media, all the different avenues. This is, another medium that really helps us get information out. The important thing is we want to have dialogue. So if somebody has a question, just like what Sean asked, is we want them to be able to ask us in real time. And this really helps do that. Facebook, all the other social media sites, people can type in. We try to give them responses too, if it's on one of our official sites, because then it gets captured for public record. But as much as we try and push out, sometimes it's just not touching people. So any other opportunities we have like this with you to get out to maybe a different group or to help spread that information. And it doesn't even mean that everybody always has to be in agreement. It's having the conversation and the dialogue and making sure that they're exposed to the information and into what we're thinking and what we're planning. We spend an extraordinary amount of time planning. What are we doing today? But what are we doing next week, next month, next year? What are we doing in 3 years? What are we doing in 5 years? And what is the expected growth? And what does the economy look like? And how do we safeguard ourselves from those things? We've there's a lot of legislation that's been introduced here recently into session. It'll be interesting to see what happens later this year on property tax reform, and people, the community is excited about that. And if you put that up to a vote, well, everybody's going to vote yes. The difficulty that creates is all of our public safety pretty much is funded, through ad valorem taxes. Now the fire district has assessments, so we're safeguarded a little bit, but that's only 50% of our budget. So it's trying to think about, if that were to happen, what things can we do to be able to, do we have to lower service levels? Do we have to reduce staffing? Do we have to do things? And how do we ensure that we don't have to do that and continue to operate the way that we can, so that we can deliver the service that this community has come to expect?
So that question is posted there. Do you see it clear?
I see it, and so I will say, Sarasota County, actually, Chief Satterley, who's our EMS division chief.
He was not on. He was on about 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah. So he actually put together the whole blood program for his previous employer, which was Sarasota County. He kind of did all the groundwork, all the legwork, got all the partners involved, had everything set to go, and came to work for us. And so Sarasota rolled that program out, I think, about probably just within a couple of months after him leaving. And I say this now, one, because he deserves a little bit of credit. You won't hear that anywhere else, but he's very well versed on it. We've looked at it here. He and I have talked about it, but there's actually some really, really interesting opportunities on the not too far horizon, where there's developing technologies and availability of some medical supplies that will do the same thing as whole blood, but it's not blood products. And so putting blood on the ambulances sounds easy. It's actually very, very expensive. It was millions of dollars for Sarasota County to start that program up. And so we kind of looked at it and we said, let's take a breath for a minute and see what happens with some of these developing technologies. We've been meeting with, going to conferences, talking to people in some of these pharmaceutical industries that are introducing stuff, and how far out on the horizon is that? Because before investing a ton of money into something that really could be obsolete and could be available to us much, much less expensive, that has a longer shelf life and doesn't have a lot of that difficulty on, I think is what we're looking at right now. So it's not something that we've closed our mind to, but we think there might be a better option in the not too distant future that's much less expensive, that does the same thing, and it's easier to set up and track. So,
and I do a tad bit of bragging about a lot of things in our city, and when I say tad bit, it's this big, it's massive. But we've got Frank Lama, who does the recycling and takes care of that. We've got the police department, the overview there. We've got the fire department, your overview there. We've got Stacy in the OC and her team there. We've got City Hall, and we've got commissioners who are all over it and trying to enhance our living environments. 6 years without a tax increase on not property taxes, that's held by county. So before anybody goes crazy, we have so much to be proud of, but we also have a city that overall the umbrella says look into the future at technology and what things are happening. You guys do that with such a chest thumping pride. Can you talk about how you analyze? You kind of just did a little bit by assessment, but that word assessment comes across the line with assessing a fire situation, assessing an EMT situation. You guys are in that mode of assessing anyway, and it's kind of bred inside. But what is it that you guys really focus on to drive you through the technology side to really get us positioned well?
So one of the things we're actually doing right now is that I have a meeting set up, I believe it's next week or the following week, with the IT division of the department and several of my internal members that are pretty tech savvy and have some good information. And we're going to start, we're actually going to develop a technology master plan for the fire department. It'll probably be a 4 or 5 year plan, but we will revisit it every year because technology is changing so quickly right now. And so it's figuring out what's out there, what's available. We are in the process this year, going into next year, we'll be changing our electronic reporting systems that we use for all of the reports that we do. And the newest ones, they have AI assisted technology that help really cut down some of the report time. They also help document it can kind of monitor and pay attention to everything they did on scene. And so if we set a goal of 4 minutes from the time we reach the patient until we give that first medication administration, if you're outside of that 4 minutes, it'll actually flag that for QA, QI. So we can find, what was that. And so there's just so much out there right now and so much information. And we're really we have some outward facing information that we give to the public on what our response times are and the things that we measure and how we do things. But there's a lot of internal information that we're gathering and we're processing right now. And we're measuring to figure out how do we improve what we're doing, like what is measurable and what can we make a difference on with the same things that we have. So, I can tell you, and I'm super proud, our ROSC rate, our return of spontaneous circulation. So when a patient goes into cardiac arrest, for us getting them back with pulse and breathing and being released from the hospital, our percentage rate is probably one of the highest in the country because of many things. And part of it starts with the community. We put out a lot of CPR programs. It's been determined now that hands-only CPR is just as effective as what we used to teach for certified CPR, where you had to give breaths and do all that. It's very simple now. It's chest compressions only. And by doing those chest compressions, it changes the pressure in the chest. And when you relieve the chest, it'll actually bring enough oxygen in, and it just dramatically increases the survivability of that patient until we get on. Thank you, Robin. I see your comment. God bless you. Yep. Until we get on scene, and then that ROSC rate helps just because of how much involvement there is in the public in doing CPR, and then all of the other things that we've measured as far as the medications that we give, how we defibrillate the patients. There's dual sequential defibrillation now. It's so much more complicated. We have cameras that we utilize when we do an intubation now. So back in my day, it was you were looking down there trying to visualize the vocal cords, and there's blood and vomit in there, and it's very difficult intubations. And now we've actually got a camera that can go in there, and you can actually see it on a screen that's this big while they're doing that, almost like what they would have in an emergency room or in a hospital, to make sure that we're getting a good intubation through the vocal cords into the trachea, and that airway is secure and going on. So there's so many things doing that. And this technology program, I think, will really help us with what's emerging right now, and also plan to how do we get our people at a younger level involved. I didn't really use AI until probably the last 6 months. And I can tell you, I was sitting here yesterday and I was amazed. On 3 screens on my computer, I had 3 different AI programs up, because one can do this, one can do that, one can do something else. But the efficiencies that you can find when you're researching something or when you're putting something together, and you have to be a subject matter expert to a point, because you still have to verify. There's some things out there. If you don't know what you're looking for, you don't verify it. You definitely can put out. Thank you, Mr. English. Thank you so much. But you have to verify all that information, make sure it's right. But it really can save you a lot of time, point you in a direction. And it's how do we get our people involved at younger ages now? They're much more comfortable with emerging technologies. So figuring out how to get them to be able to utilize and harness those technologies in the job that we do, so that as they move through the fire department and they end up moving into roles like I have now, they have a lot more comfort level with those things as they move higher in the organization. So that plan, part of that will be education of our lower level people from day one entry into the system all the way up through our current staff that we have now, to try and get them used to that.
Absolutely. Another question from Robin. Let's talk a little bit about drones and the integration of drones into the fire department.
I love this question. We're going to go over on time, but I just came back from a conference, Robin, 3 weeks ago. I was in Charleston for 4 days for a technology conference, and there was a fire chief there from San Bernardino, California, it's probably one of the poorer counties. Now, there's some wealthy people there, and there's some big businesses there, but as far as the whole county goes, it's a relatively poor county, and they cover a really, really large area. It's the largest county in California. And so obviously the wildfires out there are crazy. And there was a company that had developed a technology for fully autonomous flight for Black Hawk helicopters, and they wanted to market that to the military, and the military ended up not wanting to utilize it, not purchasing it. So this fire chief out there was introduced to a gentleman, and they set up a pilot program. They started with drones, and started with a fully autonomous drone that was hooked into all of the satellites. And basically, through AI, they taught the drone how to recognize smoke versus steam. and it covers 278 square miles. And when it does recognize smoke, then it actually verifies whether or not is it an attended fire or an unattended fire. If it verifies that it's an unattended fire, that drone would take off, go there. It would hover at a certain height and circle around, and it would give live stream to the units coming in so they knew what they had. Well, they've continued to use larger and larger drones until now they actually have a full-size Black Hawk helicopter. And when a fire comes in, that helicopter takes off by itself, has a Bambi bucket on the bottom of it. It's 300 gallons or 400 gallons. It takes off. It will go pick up water on the way to the fire. When it gets to the fire, it'll drop that water. It uses all the atmospheric conditions of what's going on, wind speed, direction, humidity, all of the atmospheric pressure, and it determines how effective that first drop was and does the calculations on how could it be more effective with the next drop while it's going to get the next bucket of water, and it goes back and it drops again. And that helicopter will continue to do those drops until somebody breaks in and diverts it because they have air tankers coming in, or until it needs to go back and refuel. It's absolutely incredible.
Can't imagine what that would do for us with 104 square miles.
Yeah. Well, the thing is right now, and we're very fortunate, we have fire stations throughout the city. So when I first started, we had one station in the city, and when we would get a brush fire and we would start down, the road either on Price Boulevard or Hillsborough to go all the way out to the Yorkshire Loop, when you go there, you might see a little wisp of smoke when you leave the station. By the time you got there 20 minutes later, it looked like a jet plane crashed, and you got 150 acres that are running on you. So we used to really have some very big fires. Now we have early notification with the 911 system, all people on cell phones that are traveling those areas, and we have fire stations located out throughout the city. So we get earlier notification and we get units on scene faster, which is great. So I'm not sure that we'll ever get to the point where, unless somebody were to donate, and if there's a company out there that wants to, we would love to capitalize on that. We may not get to the point of a Black Hawk helicopter. We've looked at drones. We decided currently the police department has a pretty significant drone program. They're very successful. They're very good at it. So when we have fires, we employ them. They show up to our command post. They help us look for spot fires. They help us, give an eye of what's going on. And then when the forestry helicopters or airplanes get into the area, we basically pull the drones back. But what I can see in the future, and what they have now is drones that sit on top of the fire station. It's housed, it's charging, it's ready to go, and certain call types that go out, whether it's a brush fire or a structure fire, that drone would actually take off. It would be dispatched to that address. It would automatically fly there. It would fly it. You can set it, say it's going to fly at a level of 150 feet, and it's going to circle 500 feet. So it'll just circle in a radius while you're on scene. And it will send that video to the crews that are coming in so they have an idea of what they're doing. They have FLIR technology, which can recognize where hot spots are in the house, so you can see where the fire is. And some of them you can see actually where there's victims, so you would know where to go and get them. So those are the types of things that we're looking at now to what we do in the future. There's drones now, underwater drones now, and as you know, all the canals and the lakes that we have here, for a dive team to go down and search some of those hours and hours and hours and hours. You get an underwater drone, you put it in there, you can search an area that takes 8 or 10 hours with a dive team. You could probably search it, in half an hour. So those are types of things we're looking at in the future, and then finding out how to balance that. Can we partner with somebody in the community, or can we find somebody to help? Because that technology, it's not inexpensive.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, as time goes on, the costs will come down, and we'll balance that with what the needs that we can do. In Taiwan, I can tell you, they just went, and it'll never take our place, but they went from 4-person staffing on their engines to 3-person staffing, and the 4th position on those engines now is a robot. And that robot basically does, it's not fully autonomous, but it will follow orders. And so they tell it what to do, and they will pull the hose line for them, and it'll do certain things it will do and certain things it won't do. But as technology, develops and continues to go, I think there's a lot of changes on the horizon.
All right, here's the beautiful thing. The fact that we're talking about the Jetsons now.
Yeah.
We grew up in the Jetsons, and now we're talking about real life Jetson type stuff. That technology is crazy, and it's going to advance. But like you said, it's costly. And
this chief in San Bernardino that I told you about, it's funny you say the Jetsons, because they're working with a company right now, and they found out the cost of these units, and he didn't have the money. And he went out and he gave a seminar on technologies and what was emerging, and he talked about this one technology, and somebody in the audience said, well, how much is it? He said, well, they start at about $500,000 a piece. And he said, how many do you need? He said, well, I'd love to start with two. So the guy wrote him a check. But basically, it's a one-person flying drone, and they're trying to advance it right now. It started out with the availability at 60 miles an hour of only 10 minutes of flight time because of battery restrictions. I think they're up to 30 minutes of flight time right now at 60 miles an hour. When they get to 45 plus minutes of fly time, he's going to actually put these into use at fire station that are remote from areas where he can put a singular paramedic into that. They can take off, they can go to an area and begin treatment up on an interstate or out in a remote area or high up on a mountain that it's going to take a while to get people to, fly right out there and begin doing patient care with a single person drone. So it's pretty amazing.
The GIS is one of the most valuable tools. Chuck English brought that up.
Absolutely.
You want to highlight that for a second?
So we've got some amazing GIS people, John Kaffenbeck and some others. The gentleman that we just hired, he's got great familiarity with GIS. It does so many different things on mapping layers and information that it provides us, not just for our reporting systems, but access to information so that we know where hydrants are, where addresses are, all that information out there. They use GIS to determine, we monitor through flood levels and different types of storms where water inundation, looks at water inundation modeling and stuff to make it more accurate than, we have these flood maps from FEMA that just aren't super accurate. And so GIS is one of the things that helps us do all that. And anytime, a new neighborhood opens, they're immediately putting those roads out, and that's accessible to us when we get dispatched to a call. And John would be much better to talk about it, and several other people that we have even on our staff than myself. But absolutely critical in what we do to have that information. It makes just a huge difference.
I want to get with you because a couple of things I want to do with Public Works is on site. I would love to get on site and do something on site to really educate the public on what you guys do. So
they do actually, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me. We've got a GIS day. I believe it's coming up, unless they just had it while I was gone.
Yeah, I think it was over.
Is it over? So,
yeah.
So once a year they do that and kind of put out that education information.
I did see the post. I think it was on a Saturday, and like every good Buckeye, I've got to do my Ohio State Buckeye crowd. We had 115 this week, so I can't let them down that way.
So there's a lot of people in GIS, at Public Works, IT. Now the fire department has some people that are using GIS and that are involved in some of that information. Downstairs, the building department and planning, and so, honestly, it's an incredible tool. So,
well, we'll get together and we'll figure out something we can do on site. Okay. I know we're going to do the wastewater treatment plant and talk about that and give an overview of what's going on there. I think it's critical that we start educating the public visually on a lot of these things, and it's amazing what we're doing with social media through the city of Northport. I hope people share that content that the communication team, Jason Bartolone and his team are doing. They're amazing at what they're doing. And good. Thanks, Chuck. November 17th. I did see that post. I think is that a Saturday? That is a Saturday.
Chuck, thank you very much. I didn't have it.
Thanks, Chuck.
It's good.
So I saw that post. I just couldn't think of the date. But I appreciate you, Chuck. Thank you so much about that.
Well, I think that's at the Shannon. I might have done autocorrect for him. I think it's at the Shannon Staub Library. But if you look it up on our social media,
Shannon Staub.
It'll be on the city's social media site.
Absolutely. There again, check out the social media pages through the city of Northport. They're very valuable, full of information, and really just get involved and stay involved. I want to say thank you. I know that we did communicate a little bit, but I got to disclose, we never have an agenda. We just start talking. because you actually text me and said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Let's just talk." So it always goes down the path, and then we get great citizens involved who ask questions and kind of lead us down their path, and that's even more important. Citizen involvements are key to this whole thing.
I think
So
you're
thank you for your time. Thank the citizens.
I think you're a lot like me, John, where, my dad raised me to say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And so I love every aspect of what I do with fire service and with the city. I'm so blessed to have been here, to have served this community for the amount of time I have. I'm in my 32nd year, and I love it as much today as I did the day that I started. And so to talk about it, I could do an 8-hour show with you and probably never run out of stuff to say, as my staff will absolutely attest to. But yeah, I absolutely enjoy it. Anytime that I can promote our people and the service that we're providing and promote this community and help educate the community on what they do. And I appreciate your help in doing that and giving us the opportunity. So thank you.
Not a problem. I appreciate all your time that you spend with me and educating the citizens on the fire department and so much more, because we didn't just cover the fire department today. We covered so much more.
You really did.
Because we included public works, we included the police department. We've got the EOC and the fire department all in one show today. So thank you very much for your time. And citizens, thank you very much, Chuck, Robin, and Sean, for your questions, and all the social media pages out there that I mentioned earlier that are sharing the content. Thank you so much for being part of it, and share. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Thanks.